TRT clinics are not doctors in the sense that doctors have your best interest in mind. TRT clinics have their bottom dollar in mind. They're salespeople, and they're trying to upsell you. So please stay away from the GHRP6, the Hexarelin, and for God's sake, don't take Sermorelin. What's up, guys? Welcome back to Drugs and Stuff with Dave Crosland. I'm Scott McNally, and all of our programming, it's brought to you by you. The people of Patreon, thank you very much for your support. We are brought to you by evalbloodanalysis.com. You can get your lab work done by Dave if you're in the UK. He'll pull his boat right up to your house. Dave's in a boat right now, in case you guys didn't know. What are you doing? Do you have a standing desk?
Yeah.
Are you standing right now?
No, I've just lifted it up so that the camera on the laptop's not looking at my nostrils.
I see. Guys, Dave is on a boat. This is for real. And we are brought to you by Strom Sports Nutrition. Thank you for your support, Strom. They have great health and performance supplements, great health stacks, especially for you guys on cycle. We are also brought to you by supplementsource.ca for Canadians. Dave, it's an important day. We do have a topic. I'll let you guys know. And we're going to take your listener questions, all of that stuff as usual. Comment below with questions for the next show. But Dave, it's an important day. We are finishing the transformation contest. I've already had people that were like, you were supposed to finish this last week, and they're sending me pictures. So we do have some people that are already done. Some of them I was like, hey, listen, you could keep going if you wanted to. And they're like, nah, I'm good. This is all we're going to do.
Okay.
So, yeah, guys. Yeah.
Send your pictures in then. And then we can get this judged. Now, we do this as we said. We're going to shortlist it. Then we're going to get stupid bollocks to come in and
Zach Kahn.
Yeah, do the final.
Yeah, we'll see if Zach will do it. That would be cool. If Zach isn't available, we'll find someone else to help us out. I have a lot of friends, and you know a lot of people. So there's that. See how I said Dave didn't have a lot of friends, guys? There's a reason for that.
I don't have any friends. I'm quite happy not having friends, to be honest.
Guys, Dave's having a long day. All right, he's just in and out of meetings.
I don't mean it in a negative. I'm quite happy in myself, mate. So
Dave's had a long day, guys, and he's on the boat. And Zach, what?
Zach's been picking on me anyway.
Yeah, well, we'll have to get him on, and we'll have him do the finals. You guys can email me your before and after pictures. You should already sent me your before pictures. Send me the before pictures again, along with your after pictures at McNallyDiets@gmail.com. We'll get this thing wrapped, and we'll be able to tally this up within a week or so. So anyway, I'm excited for that. Also, Dave, I'm running a contest for our iTunes listeners. You guys can, if you leave us a good 5-star review over the month of September, you are automatically entered into a contest to win a free t-shirt. So there's that. And I've got a question for you.
Isn't that bribery?
Kind of, but that's what people do. That's how the world works.
Lie for me and I'll give you a t-shirt is effectively what you've just said.
I never said anything about lying. I just said give us a good 5-star review. If you don't like us, then just don't leave the review unless you win a free t-shirt. Then you have to lie. So yeah, lie. Tell them you actually like our show.
Anyway, if you're going to leave a good review, it's lying anyway, isn't it?
So here's the deal, man. We last episode was running Tren without side effects. Is there a better way? And we had a guy who had commented. I wonder if I can find this comment here, see what he exactly said. But he was like, you know what? I run a really low dose of Tren. I do 75 milligrams 3 times a week. And somebody else said, you know what? I've been having really good success microdosing Tren. I just microdose it at 40 milligrams. I think he said every other day, or maybe it was every day. I run 40 milligrams every day, just a microdose of Tren. So my question to you and to our audience is, what is a low dose? Because a lot of people would argue that 40 milligrams of Tren every day is not a low dose.
I think in part this is relative. And it's based on, your level of development, your level of drug experience, and how much you have run previously.
Yeah.
I mean, someone who's regularly running 2G plus, a 400-500 mg cycle is a low dose. Somebody who's doing their first ever cycle, then it's substantially more in relation to them.
Yeah.
For me, microdosing is when you're talking about amounts of 10-ish milligrams.
Yeah.
And a low dose, I would say, would be 100 total, maybe over a week. Maybe 150 would still be regarded as being relatively low. Then 2 to sort of, also it depends on compound as well. So 400 to 500 milligrams of test is not a particularly high dose of test, but 4 to 5 milligrams of Tren is definitely a very healthy mid-range Tren dose.
So what would be like a micro dose of, say, testosterone? Like maybe you're completely natural and you're going to try here, because what's a low dose of test then?
Well, I'd say a microdose of test would be 10, 15 milligrams a day. And a low dose would be 200-300, up to sort of 4 to 5. And then I'd say once you start going over 4 or 5, you're getting into a mid-range dose then, which depending on your experience, could stretch above a gram. And it also depends on, are we talking test as a single compound? If you're running a gram of test, it's a decent dose of test, but it's not a high total anabolic load.
Yeah.
If you're running a gram of test and a gram of mast, now we're starting to clip on higher doses, and the total anabolic is high. Yeah, 2 grams is, to me, most people, 500 and below is low dose total anabolics.
Yeah.
A lot of people run around the gram mark. Slightly more serious users or more experienced users are probably pushing into the 2 gram at points, and they're going to sit somewhere between the gram and 2 gram. And then when you start going over 2, you start getting into, heavier users and much more heavily muscled. A lot of the pros I know have gone as high as 4 and 5 gram at periods in their careers, but most of them now are somewhere between the 2 to 3 gram mark on average.
Yeah.
Though there are those that are lower. Dusty's one that's always been lower, and there are those that are higher, and there will always be that. But from most of the pros I talk to now, they're sort of averaging somewhere between 2 and 3.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. And I think that's a pretty good spot as far as like high-end gear use for experienced guys. And yeah, man, I remember, like I've told you guys before, my first cycle ever was 15 milligrams only of Tbol. No, nothing else, no test, no nothing. And I gained like 20 pounds. 10 pounds was water. I kept like 10 pounds of that. But I also was a lot smaller. You know what I mean? So it's like, it's easier to keep your gains. I remember though at the time, looking at the message boards and being like, man, these guys are wrong. Like they're running 500 tests at plus, 25 to 50 Tbol. I only needed 15 milligrams only. And that was plenty for me. Well, if you give a more experienced guys 15 milligrams of Tbol, he's not going to get much out of it. Right. But if you've never done anything in your life, man, you can keep it low like that. And I think that's probably the benefit of what everybody's doing nowadays. Cause so many people are low dose, get the most out of the least. And then when that's not working anymore, you have a lot of room to go up and still be in that low dose cycle range.
It's a difficult area because, and I've had this argument before or discussion. I'm healthy because I'm running a low dose and I keep my cycles under a gram, and I've gained 10 pounds over a year and a half.
Yeah.
And then the opposite of that is, well, I've just run a 2 gram cycle and in 10 weeks I've gained 15 pounds. So which is healthier? The guy that's had to run drugs for an extended period of time, or the guy that's run them for a short period of time but got more out of it? And I honestly don't know is the answer. There's going to be limitations both ways.
Yeah.
But a lot of it is experience-based as well. A guy that's 20 pound over his natural genetic sort of muscle base is going to get a lot out of a sub 1 gram cycle. But a guy that's pushing 80 pound over his natural genetic base he's not going to get a great deal out of that because, he's already at such a point beyond where he would be naturally. He needs a higher level of anabolic to sustain continuous progress. He doesn't necessarily need a higher level to maintain.
Yeah.
But to sustain progress, he's going to need a higher level of anabolics. Or he's going to need to expose himself to compounds that work in a different way to what he's used in the past. And that's the other alternative. It's not always about more dose. It can sometimes be about using a different compound instead, something that approaches muscle building within the body in a slightly different way.
Yeah.
Because all the compounds have their own unique properties. None of them, though the basic operation of an anabolic was the same in every one, they all have their own unique distinctive traits, which is what separates them, which is why we have different anabolics in the first place, because they were all saying, why would we have bothered developing different ones? So they're all developed to take advantage of certain unique properties that each compound has over another one.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just a little question I was wondering, and I'm curious to know what the audience thinks too. You guys tell us, what is a low dose? What would you consider low dose total milligrams? And what would you consider to be a high dose total milligrams? And we had a bunch of listener questions too. Guy from New Zealand had asked us, he said, can you guys discuss Tbol? He says, I'm thinking of adding it into my current protocol. Any information and thoughts on Tbol would be appreciated. And I rolled my eyes because Tbol is one of the few compounds I've never used. Back when I started gear, people always said, oh, Tbol is like a dry D-ball. You won't gain as much weight from it. And all I heard was you won't gain as much weight from it, so I never took it.
Yeah, I mean, it's not technically correct, but Tbol, the easiest way of describing Tbol is a non-aromatizing D-ball. It doesn't aromatize. It's similar from a point of view of improvements in strength and that. It was a very popular performance drug, and for good reason. There's some good data on it, and we've touched on this quite a few times. I think it's a compound that's probably overlooked a lot now, and I think that's unfortunate because it's a decent oral. To be honest, for me, particularly off season, I would definitely be going Tbol over Anavar any day.
Yeah. You feel like feel like it grew more muscles, what you're saying?
Yeah, I feel it's a more beneficial compound. I mean, it's not going to give you the hit that Oxy does, but we're talking two very different compounds there when we start looking at those two drugs. But I found Tbol to generally be well tolerated, very easy to manage, particularly as an add-on. Obviously, if it's a standalone, you've got to worry about estrogen being too low, but very, very well tolerated. It isn't particularly stressful on the liver. It isn't particularly stressful on the stomach. I mean, it'll have some impact like all orals do, but, it's not in any way standing head and shoulders above anyone else in the negative side of things. And I just think it's a compound that's sort of been neglected and forgotten about and just hasn't got the popularity of others. And there's no real reason for that. It's a perfectly viable, good little compound. And yeah, I mean, I'm not saying people should use more. I do think it's one that people avoid for no real apparent reason. I mean, availability can be difficult. I get that. It's not a popular drug, and as a result, availability tends to be a bit lower.
True. It seemed like it was more popular 20 years ago.
Yeah, it was massively popular in the 70s in sports and the 80s to a degree as well, but it doesn't seem to have really. I mean, I've never known it be particularly popular in the UK. I don't know if the States was different, but over here it's never really had a big following.
Okay. Yeah, like I said, it's one of the very few compounds that I've never used. I never used that. I never used check drops, and I never used injectable methyltren. I know you used
I've used M-Tren. Yeah, I've used M-Tren.
I used it orally.
We never used to get it orally. We only got it injectable.
Oh, okay.
Well, when I came around to using it anyway, it was only really available as an injectable.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've used methyltren. To be honest, I didn't get a great deal out of it. I was expecting sort of, really intense focus training wise and didn't really get much at all from it from that point of view.
Yeah, I remember you saying that.
Thank you for tuning in. And if we are providing value to you today, let me encourage you to subscribe and hit the bell. We have several bodybuilding podcasts that come out each week.
What about this one? So, squat question: quarter squats or full squats or parallel squats? I've seen a few people preach the importance of the full squat over the quarter squat. From what I know, sprinters generally only perform parallel to quarter squats and never go below, as they're not power lifters. What do you guys prefer and recommend?
So first thing is, what's sprinting got to do with building muscle mass? Sprinting's about building explosive power in a running motion, which is a very limited range, leg movement.
Yeah.
Apart from out of the block, you're probably only moving through a quarter of the quad range when you sprint anyway, maybe slightly more, but you're not using a huge amount of the quad range, not like you would in a squatting motion. To me, the greatest range you can move over is going to stimulate the most muscle. But there is a caveat to that, and that is that you can handle safely and in a controlled manner. And with the squat, I think the important thing with the squat is that you go to a depth that isn't causing your lower spine to butt wink, as I've always called it, but I think you know what I mean, where your backside dips forward, because that's beyond the limits of your flexibility. Now, that is dangerous. That's putting you at risk of injury. It's putting an unduly load on your spine. So for me, your squat depth is as deep as you can go, whilst maintaining proper hip alignment and proper spinal alignment. And if that happens to be quarter, half, three-quarter squat, then that's what it is, but you work on improving that flexibility at the same time. I would never recommend going to a arse to grass squat if your flexibility is not capable of achieving that.
Yeah.
I mean, I've always squatted deep. It was just how I was brought up with squats. It wasn't particularly that I did it because I wanted to rave about being arse to fucking heel squatter or because I had any other intentions with it. It was just how I was taught to squat, and it was what felt comfortable to me. I tried parallel squatting and I found it awkward as hell. It just felt so unnatural stopping at that point. And I would squat until my hamstrings sat on my calves, and then I'd come back up as I got bigger. Obviously, that range did get a little bit shorter. It was just what I could handle in a safe and controlled way. And when I tried to do what would be a parallel squat, I never felt safe with it. I always felt it was wrong. It just felt uncomfortable, so I never went that way.
Yeah. Yeah, I liked some advice I heard from John Meadows. He had said, and I never heard this term before, he was like, when we were younger, we used to call this particular leg development, he said we called it turnip legs. Because you could see the guys that weren't squatting deep because they'd get turnip legs where their leg was big at the top and then small at the bottom. And you know what? I've seen that look. And I'll tell you what, man, when I've actually gone out of my way to work on trying to do as deep of a squat as I can comfortably do, I've noticed better leg development in the lower quad, in the lower leg. I think there really is something to that. Plus, we know everything about loading from the stretch portion, and that, the deeper you are, the more of a stretch you're going to have in that muscle. And if you can load that muscle in its most stretched position, I mean, I think that makes sense for growing as much muscle as possible. But like you said, man, I think it's going to depend on flexibility. And let's not just talk about, squats. I'm also thinking like hack squats, leg press, all those things. Are you doing like half reps on your leg press, or are you like, I found, man, I like to open my stance up. So, a lot of times you see guys that are like, oh, I keep my feet close together and that way I can focus on the outer sweep, But I feel like if you have a wider stance and you let your legs come down around your rib cage, you can get a deeper squat. They're not getting stopped by like hitting your chest, at the bottom. Mm-hmm. And I do feel that you're getting more overall leg development. There's something to be said about letting each leg work independently. The closer you have those legs together, man, because I've seen people that like their knees are almost touching, and it's almost like the inner thigh doesn't develop because the legs are pushing in on each other, and they're not, the inner thigh almost, I think, can stop working when you do that, because I've just seen just the development of guys that have really poor inner quads, but then the outer sweep looks, real strong.
Yeah, I mean, I used to leg press knees to armpits was basically my guide.
Oh yeah, okay. As long as your butt doesn't come up, right?
That was my line. My line was that my knees were in line with my armpits.
Okay, yeah.
So I didn't always get that deep, but that was my point of where I kept my range, so that my stomach didn't get in the way of my squat.
Yeah.
Sorry, my leg press. And the other thing with that is, in fact, this is a little challenge for people. Do a leg press. Okay. Lower it down. When you get to your bottom position, retract your stomach, hold it in. Then do the positive part of the motion with your stomach retracted.
Wait, say that again. I tuned you out on accident. I was looking at the next question. I'm sorry.
No, mate, it's not. I can't even argue. It's not uncommon for this show, is it? So in the leg press, you lower to your lowest point. Yeah?
Yeah.
Retract your stomach. Hold your stomach retracted, and then do the positive part of the motion.
So you're holding your stomach in.
As you get to the bottom, you pull your stomach in and you hold it in while you do the push.
And what does that do?
Try it.
Okay. Oh, wait. Sorry, I missed it again. I stopped. I forgot to listen to you.
So
I'm kidding.
I know, but what a lot of us do subconsciously is we pressurize the core against the quads.
We do. Yeah, I do that. I know I do.
So when you start the movement, what you're actually doing is you're pushing your legs out the bottom with your core. So by retracting your core, you deactivate it from a point of view of being able to pressurize.
Yeah.
And then from the very start of the motion, it is all quad. You will feel a difference.
Huh.
If you pull that stomach properly back in and retract it and hold it, you will feel a difference in the engagement in the quad. And you'll find it's much higher up in the frontal quad than you're used to. It makes it much harder.
If you guys try that, comment. I'm going to be curious to hear what people get out of that. Then the next one we had was a comment, and it was the comment I was looking for earlier, because it was Jose. He said, I started microdosing Tren it's Tren E at 40 milligrams daily. So is that considered a microdose then, because it's Tren E? And he says, my sleep is far better this way. I mean, you're not getting like a big blast of Tren E. You know what I'm saying? So
I wouldn't call it to me, it's a bit high. I mean, you still got a total. What have you got a total there of 280?
Yeah.
So it's not really. It's not a high dose of Tren, but I don't think it qualifies as a microdose.
Yeah.
And some people argue, well, microdosing is not to do with total dosing; it's to do with the amount you take a day. But the point is, it is to do with total dosing because the amount you take a day adds up to the total dosing. True.
Oh, here was an interesting one. We never got this question before. He says, well, we have gotten questions along these lines, but his life is different. This guy is a model, Dave. We don't have many models that watch this show. You notice that?
But excuse me.
Well, besides you. I mean, you are a model. You have modeled, and you're an actor too. So there's that.
I'm the after for the health ad campaigns against you eating McDonald's.
So, okay. He says, love the show. Question for the next podcast. I'm not a bodybuilder, but I'm an amateur model. I do modeling gigs for my university and town. I experimented with steroids, test and mast for 3 months, and then I'd gotten off cold turkey. I recovered, but I have put on some fat and I got chubby. Nobody likes a chubby model. There's that. I'm trying to get lean, sub 10%, but I'm finding it harder than I did before steroids. I do intermittent fasting and keto with cardio. I think I might have damaged my metabolism. Please help me. He says, do you recommend any fat burner supplements to fasten my metabolism or fat burning? And he says, also, any advice regarding scar tissue due to injecting steroids and how to treat them?
Start with the scar tissue. That's quite simple. That's deep tissue massage. Break the tissue down for a deep tissue massage, you'll remove the scar tissue. So that's not a difficult fix. He stated that he's recovered. I'm assuming something here, but something in my gut tells me this might be correct. I don't think he's tested. I think he just feels like he's recovered.
Yeah, I could see that.
Because what he's describing would, to me, point to the fact that he hasn't fully recovered and he actually has an unfavorable test-to-estrogen ratio at the moment.
Okay, yeah.
So the first thing I'd be looking at is if he has tested, then fine. I'd need to know where his numbers are, but I got this gut feeling that he hasn't. So the first thing would be to check and see where his testosterone is. And he may actually find that the reason for all these problems is because his test is low. Because I don't see anything that would suggest or point to why you'd have any damage to his metabolism.
Yeah. I'm going to tell you what, too. I would bet that he's not eating enough. He's on keto. He's doing intermittent fasting. You know, I bet that if he and I were working together and I were to throw in maybe 3 carb meals per day, maybe we do oats in the morning, 30 grams of carbs, half cup of oats, and a cup of rice pre and post workout on training days, I would wonder, well, what's going to happen? Usually people start telling me if they've been fasting for a long time and they're doing keto for a long time and we do something like that, maybe it's even less, maybe 3/4 of a cup of rice pre and post. Depends on how the guy's metabolism works. I wouldn't be surprised if he did that, if he started getting hungrier, and then he started getting better workouts and then the scale started moving. I just wouldn't be surprised if the guy needs more food, intermittent fasting. I don't really have people do intermittent fasting for bodybuilding diets. And I'm talking about getting people down to like low single digit stage level condition. We don't fast,
Yeah, I know I see that a lot because I'm very keen on a keto start to people, like almost like a reset. And then when we introduce carbs, inevitably 9 times out of 10 within the first week, though they're on the same calories, they're starving. They're absolutely starving when the carbs have come back in. And then we use that as a springboard and then manage that to drive the food up and forward.
Yeah.
So it doesn't surprise me that if he added carbs in, he'd have a good reaction. The other thing is he's not, has he mentioned anything about activity? I don't think there's been a mention about activity.
No, I don't think so. I mean, I hope he's doing some sort of did he say cardio? He didn't say anything about cardio.
The other thing I find quite common with people is that they go on a calorie restrictive diet, they lose some weight, they stop, they reduce the food more, they lose some weight, they stop, they reduce the food more, and then all weight loss stops.
Right.
And what they actually need to do is bring the food back up, go back a step, but add in more calorific burn by adding in more cardio.
Yeah.
And I find that actually keeping the food a little bit higher, but increasing the cardio is generally much better for dropping fat loss when you're just talking like a general tidy up. I mean, I think for most people, there's an inevitability if you're trying to get down to single digit body fat levels that you're going to have low food and cardio. But I think from a cut point of view, a lot of people will actually respond better to increasing the cardio over further reducing the calories.
Yeah. Yeah. And he said he's not a bodybuilder. I would argue that if he's exercising, at least like if he's lifting weights and he's paying attention to his diet and he is trying to look a physical way, obviously building muscle and being lean, I would call that bodybuilding. It's just not competitive bodybuilding, but that's the act of building your body, right?
Yeah. I mean, I haven't seen that argument for a long time, actually. It used to pop up quite regular. Are you a bodybuilder if you don't compete? Are you a bodybuilder if you don't do X, Y, Z and all that crap? And at the end of the day, I suppose literally anyone that's in the action of trying to change their physical appearance is technically bodybuilding.
Yeah. Hey, Dave, can you try something for me? I'm just very curious to hear how it sounds. You normally say Z, and I've heard you say XYZ. Can you try to say XYZ? I want to hear how it sounds.
XYZ.
No, try to say Z. Say Z. I want to hear that.
Why?
I just want to hear what it sounds like coming out of your...
But it's not a real word.
Victoria says Z as well.
Well, that's because Victoria speaks proper English, not like you with your Americanese.
Guys, let's talk about intra-workout carbs and saving money. So like the past 10, 15 years, intra-workouts become super popular. It's a great way to support pre-workout insulin use. It's great for recovery, and it's great for endurance in those long workouts. Here's the thing, it's really expensive. It's not only expensive for us, it's expensive for supplement companies. They really don't make a lot of money off of it. That's where True Nutrition comes in. So True Nutrition, they're not only a retailer, they're also a manufacturer. They're actually making a lot of the products that you guys are already buying from other companies. So just think about it. You're going to cut out the middleman. The only thing you're going to miss out on is the fancy labels and the branding. Outside of that, you're getting the exact same high quality products, but you're getting it directly from the source. If you're going to pay for the price of highly branched cyclic dextrin, ensure that you're getting 25 grams per scoop, not of a mix of carbs, but just of highly branched cyclic dextrin. We can mix the other stuff in later, Use our code THINK, get some savings, plus it's like voting for us. It lets them know that you support what we're doing.
Okay, here's a terrible one. Question for Dave Crosland. Can you...
Z.
He said it, guys. He said he can do it. Can you please explain how one would use CJC 1295 with DAC? What benefits would you see for a subject who is also on TRT, 36 years old?
I'm going to pass this to Scott because I'm not really a big peptide, especially not growth hormone secretary fan. I sort of think they're all right, but they don't really do much, to be honest.
Yeah, they do something, but here's the thing, man. I'm going to tell this guy right now. I just had a conversation with a client yesterday. She said, I just tested my growth hormone levels and they're very low. I think I could use Sermorelin. And I'm going to be honest with you guys. There are TRT companies that are trying to sell you Sermorelin. Sermorelin is a generation 1 secretagogue, okay? It's been out for like 20, 30 years. It does very, very little. But you know what it does do? It costs less than growth hormone. And these companies, they can also sell pharma-grade growth hormone to you, but you're probably not going to buy it because it's going to cost you $2,000 a month. So you come to them to get on your TRT, and then they say, we'll put you on, Sermorelin or, GHRP or whatever, CJC and Hexarelin, all these things. And it's only going to cost you $300 additional per month. You're not going to pay $2,000, but you might pay $300. And so, yeah, you'll buy those things. Here's the deal, man. TRT clinics are not doctors in the sense that doctors have your best interest in mind. TRT clinics have their bottom dollar in mind. They're salespeople, and they're trying to upsell you. So please stay away from the GHRP6, the Hexarelin, and for God's sake, don't take Sermorelin.
Yeah, I mean, in reality, what you're going to get, you get a little bit of fullness. You might see some slight improvements in sleep quality and stuff like that, but it's not going to be anything dramatic. Talking about TRT companies, I'm strange you mentioned that. So, you
wonder why we don't have a TRT sponsor ever, Dave? Have you ever wondered that?
Yeah, there's a TRT company over here called Optimal. And they used to be run by a guy called Alistair. He sold it now, though he's still the face of it. They have changed the ranges on their blood tests.
Oh, really?
So now we can argue all day long what's an effective level of testosterone, but the clinical range in the UK, depending on age, can be as low as 6.9 to 7.6, I think it is, and then up to 25 to 29. It changes with age. So as you're older, the lower end gets lower and the upper end gets lower, but healthy ranges, we'll say, is 8 to 29, just for a simple argument.
Okay.
So that's the clinical. Now, we all know that levels of 8, 9, 10, and 11 will be symptomatic and you will feel like you've got low test. But it's not a clinical out-of-range reading. So Optimal now on their testosterone levels, their ranges run from 12 to 29.
Oh, they just cut out those bottom end numbers, huh?
Well, they don't exist anymore. So if you do one of their tests and you're 12 or below, then by all intents and purposes, say you knew nothing about testing,
Yeah.
you had no knowledge about all this, your immediate assumption is going to be, I need TRT, I've got clinically low testosterone, which you may need TRT, but it's not clinically low. And you could also look at alternatives of supplementation. Some of the test boosts can be quite effective for people, particularly if this is a nature-imposed low testosterone level rather than a chemical-imposed one, i.e. you were a user.
Yeah.
I've noticed another lab has done very similar, and they've done anything below 15 is clinically low, and anything below 12 just doesn't exist. So their markers show anything between 12 and 15 as being low and requiring TRT.
Wow.
And it's just like, this is starting to get a little bit naughty now. You know what I mean?
Yeah, so you get 11 and they're like, oh, you're not even in range, mate.
Yeah. And though I appreciate that people at 11 can feel like dog crap and do need TRT, I'm not saying that isn't the case.
Yeah.
I do think it's important that the customer has the proper information so they can make a proper decision. Because though for a lot of us, particularly in our industry, TRT it's just part of what we do and we don't think anything of it. There's a lot of people that's actually a very serious commitment and a very serious step.
Sure.
And I've had many a conversation with people post-bloods who have like, look, I don't want to do TRT. I want to try and not have to need it.
Yeah.
And these tainted results or tainted ranges are taking that choice out of people's hands because they're being misled as to what it is. And there's only one reason for that, and that's money.
Yeah, I could see that for sure. So anyway, guys, if you're ever wondering why we don't have a TRT sponsor, there's probably some of your answers right here in this conversation, I would guess. Yeah, I'm just not a fan. And I'll tell you what here's the deal too with something like CJC. Well, the CJC with DAC, you can use that less frequently. But your levels you're not going to get really a ton out of it. In order to get a good benefit, you're going to have to do multiple injections of multiple different peptides every day. And it's going to also depend on things like when you eat. There's going to be all this timing. And then in the end, it ends up being oftentimes just as expensive as a good reputable 2 units from a UGL or, generic growth hormone. So I would much more likely want to direct you to that. Like go with real growth if that's what you're thinking about doing, and just run a modest dose. At this stage of the game, there is such a competitive market for generic growth hormone. It's not like 20 years ago. We used to have to worry about, well, is it HCG? Is this stuff fake? There's a lot of real garbage out there, I'm sure, but there's a lot of really good growth hormone out there. And here's the thing too, with Genoshic, everybody's doing testing now. So there's everybody who's running or selling, everybody who's providing good growth hormone is also getting it tested, or the people who are using it are getting tested. So you get part of a message board where there's a lot of these discussions going on, and you can keep a good handle on what's good. So you'll have to do research, do some digging, but I would suggest going that route instead.
Yeah, the days have gone where growth hormone came off dead bodies.
Yeah. So I knew somebody who used that.
The Russian stuff.
What's that?
Was it the Russian stuff?
I'm not sure. And he talked about it publicly, so I can say my late friend Dave Kalick, and he told me that when he used the Cadaver growth, he said it was weird because you took it for like a month or 6 weeks, and he said you didn't really notice the effects while you took it. It was like the 6 weeks or the 2 months after you stopped. And he named a couple New York bodybuilders who were also using it at the same time he was using it. He said he got weird side effects though. He said his elbows grew. He said his ears grew, his nose grew, his hands grew. So he said it was definitely, he said it was like no other growth hormone, the stuff that we have now. All right. Okay, I have a question for Scott and Uncle Dave. Okay, how do you talk with young guys about gear? For example, you get asked in person about it, especially if they are too young to even think about it.
So I'm guessing somebody who he feels is too young has inquired about using gear.
Yeah.
I've always found this difficult. I've taken a standpoint with this subject in general of I will try and be as honest and open and give them as much information as I possibly can, both negative and positive, so that they can make an informed decision about what they want to do. I will offer explanation as to how the drugs work, what they do, side effects, what needs to be managed, the potential implications of what they're doing. But ultimately, it is their decision. And if they're already asking about it, better for them to get the right information.
Yeah.
Than be given some bullshit information like, oh, like TRT is a mil a week or something like that. It's better that they at least get the best quality information so they can make the best decision. But you can't make the decision for them however much you want to. You can't stop them from doing what they're going to do if they're over 18 or over 21 years old, depending on the country. All you can do is just give them the best grounding and hope for the best with them. It is a difficult one, but how do you argue with somebody that you can't use this drug that I use, even though it will make your results come quicker? It's like, how do you have an argument?
I knew about gear from a very young age, like 13, 14 years old. My dad's friends had talked to me about it. And the main consensus that I understood and that I followed too was that you wanted to build a foundation first. That's what I'd always learned. Oh, well, your testosterone levels are already high. Keep working on your foundation. And then when you're ready for it, then you'll be in a much better place. Maybe you're 19, 20 years old. You've been training since you're 14. By the time you're 20 years old, you're ready for a cycle, And
we all know that's right. But in the modern world, the reality of it is I'm 19. I've been trained 6 months.
Yeah.
I'm frustrated. I'm not progressing, and I want to look good on the beach next summer. This drug will help me do that.
I followed it though. Like I listened to that advice. I actually believed it, and I followed it. And here's what I ended up doing, Dave, because I trained from the time I was about 12 to the time I was 16. And then I started, like smoking weed and drinking and stuff like that. And then I just was like, I'll do that stuff instead. And then when I got into college, I stopped doing that stuff for a little while. And I started exercising again, trained again for a few years. And then I went back into the art and I moved to the Southwest and couldn't be bothered. So then I never used gear during any of that time. But then when I was about 30 and I was like, you know what? I'm going to get into this and I'm going to start nailing it hard. I did it for about several months maybe. And then I was like, yeah, now I'm ready. So I didn't even have like a huge foundation at that time, but I trained for, you know what I mean? God, years and years. I knew what I was doing. And honestly, man, at that point when I started gear, I was like, you know what? I better get everything right because I know that I'm going to blow up from this stuff. And if I don't keep up with training, if I don't continue to learn about diet and do better and better with it, I'm going to lose all the gains I make. And that's going to be terrifying. You know what I'm saying? Like, and I'll be embarrassed of that. So my embarrassment forced me to continue to get better and better at training and diet, even though I didn't have a huge foundation when I finally did start.
I trained 5 years, hard and serious. Diet was never great. It was due to a lack of education really, but diet was never great. I mean, don't get me wrong, it wasn't garbage, as in like ice cream and burgers and crap like that, but it was just not the best.
Yeah.
It was actually probably a little bit on the protein light side and too carb heavy, if I'm honest. I trained from 14 to 19, and I trained hard, and I trained with some really good guys.
Yeah.
So I had a very good grounding in the gym and a very good grounding of training, and there was no way I could skimp it when I was training. You know, there was always someone there that was busting my balls. And I went on at 19, and that was after probably 2 years of pressure to go on from people around me. But I never went on to particularly get big. I went on because it meant I could train harder.
Yeah, I can see that. I remember saying that.
Yeah, my motivation was around the gym. But it was it just felt like the next step.
Yeah.
It felt like it was time. It was the next step. It was the next thing to do. It wasn't, like I say, I had pressure for a couple of years, so it wasn't something that I was caving into at a very early time. I'd said no, and to be honest, by the time I actually decided to start, everyone around me that had suggested it had given up suggesting it because they were convinced I just wasn't going to do it.
Yeah.
And it just felt natural. I mean, I had no education and I didn't know what I was doing, and I was not intentionally, but I was badly advised. And the result of that was that first 4 years of a non-stop cycle.
Oh, God. I will say this, man. I'm right with you, though, that I think that education is the most important thing. Because although I knew I didn't want to use gear, I did know guys at about 16 years, 15 years old that were already using. And the information that they had was utterly terrible. They basically knew this. There were 2 types of steroids. They're both pills. One of them will get you bigger and one of them will get you leaner. That's all the information they had. And man, you know, if the more you can educate somebody and let them know, like, hey, not only about building the foundation first, but also then like, it's going to shut down, like everything you said, man, you know that it could shut down your test. Know that this could affect your future. You know, you start telling guys that they might have sexual dysfunction as a teenager, that might change their minds quickly. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think even if I was told then that I was going to be where I am now, I don't think it would have changed my mind, to be honest.
Wow. All right. How about this one? Question for the next show. I'd like to run a moderate dose of NPP and test for size, but I'm prone to gyno and libido issues when using a 19 NOR. I would like to not take Cadaver or Arimidex because of their effects feel a bit harsh. Would running a higher dose of Mast or Primo with my cycle be any effective solution to maintaining libido and managing gyno while on NPP? Would Aromacin or Proviron be possible alternatives to Cadaver and Arimidex as well? Thanks in advance. Cheers.
Dose dependent, but P5P could potentially be a replacement for Cadaver if the NPP dosing is not too high. But I'd recommend starting the P5P at least a week, if not 2 weeks before the cycle, so it's well established before you start your cycle.
Yeah.
Aromacin would be a decent alternative as an AI. Proviron I wouldn't bother with. It's not so much the Proviron can't be effective as an estrogen management. I find it very commonly faked.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. The amount of blood work I've seen when people on Proviron is having no discernible impact on their estrogen levels. I'm not a fan of adding in Primo purely for estrogen management. If a DHT drug is on your list of what you want in your cycle, then fine. You can pick Primo and get that secondary anti-estrogen effect, yes. But I wouldn't take what was, say for argument's sake, your plan was 300 tests, 300 MPP, split 100 Monday, Wednesday, Friday, right?
Yep.
That's your plan cycle. And then you decide, well, I want some estrogen management, so I'm going to add in 300 mega Primo. To me, no, you don't increase your anabolic threshold by a third.
Right.
just to manage estrogen. You use an AI. If you don't get on with ADEX, fine. There's aromasin. There are other alternatives, but you don't go for another anabolic. You're increasing your total anabolic load by 30%.
People forget that.
If you planned on a total dose of a gram, then you could decide, right, okay, I want to get my AI from an anabolic, then I'll do 300 tests, 300 MPP, 300 Primo. Fine. Yeah, that I have no issue with. I just don't like this using an anabolic extra as an AI. If you're using it anyway, then it makes perfectly sense to pick one that's going to give you some form of estrogen management as well. Might as well get 2 for 1.
Yep. I like that idea. I like that thought a lot, because people are forgetting that your Masteron and your Primo are also anabolic steroids. You know what I mean? So there's that. You know, he mentioned, he was like, well, what about aromasin instead of Arimidex? I think you could really get the same effect with aromasin as you could with Arimidex. It's just a matter of figuring out how you're going to need to dose it. It's going to be obviously different. I think Arimidex is easier to use. Like, it's easier to, especially for somebody that's gyno prone. But the gyno is, I mean, I would say just get your estrogen under control. Here's another thought, though. I mean, this is a situation, I think, Dave, where we're bashing on Arimidex as being this like terrible, harsh thing. Realistically, let's compare that to using 600 milligrams of steroids. You know, which one is really worse for you? I don't know. But I mean, this is going to be a controlled, short thing. I think the issue with Arimidex might be that, you know, if you're, say, running high testosterone for your TRT, and you then need some sort of an AI to manage that testosterone for your TRT, which you're going to do for the rest of your life. If you then choose Arimidex, that's where it may be a harsh compound, because now you've committed to using whatever it is, a milligram of Arimidex every week for the infinity till you're gone. You know, if you're using it for, say, 12 weeks, it's a different situation. So it's not going to be nearly as, like, quote unquote, harsh for that period of time, if it allows you to then have a safe and effective cycle, you know. So I'd also take that on board.
I mean, the other issue is, right, Proviron has an anti-estrogen effect, aromasin has an anti-estrogen effect, and Arimidex has an anti-estrogen effect. Of those 3 compounds, Proviron is the weakest, Arimidex is the strongest. If you're running 500 milligrams a test, Proviron may be an option, but you're probably going to have to run it daily. Aromasin will be an option, and you're probably going to need it twice a week. ADEX will be an option, you're going to need it once a week. But as that dose goes up, so now we get to a gram of test, Proviron now is not really an option because you just can't take enough of it to keep on top of the estrogen. Aromasin is now becoming an everyday or every other day dosing, and it's starting to get challenging to manage because you're needing so much more of it. Now ADEX comes into play because it's more effective. You're not having to take huge amounts of it to manage the same levels of estrogen. So the drugs come into play depending on how much estrogen you're having to try and manage. The higher estrogen, the stronger the compound, which means you're moving more toward ADEX. The lower the estrogen, the lower the compound, which means you can get away with more stuff like Proviron or aromasin. So that's the long and short of it. Is it all depends on what level of estrogen you're generating as to how much estrogen management you need. But there does become a point where the milder AIs are just not practical or effective enough to manage that level of estrogen that you're generating.
Yep. I think that's a very good explanation. I was asked, am I still getting sick from the Melanotan 2 nasal spray? Nope, but I'm still only doing, 100 micrograms per day. 100 micrograms per day, and I think it's starting to work, Dave. I mean, you can't really see it on the screen, but I think I'm starting to get a little bit more color. And if I continue doing that, you know, for another 5 weeks through the Olympia, I bet you that I'll definitely look darker by then. I'm not tanning either, by the way.
You say you just look a shade of white at the moment.
I know. I don't look any different right now on screen. There's that.
In fact, you probably look grey, closer to grey than you do brown.
I think that's the gray shirt in the blue background. It's kind of like I have a very cool tone thing going on today. I noticed. You look pink, Dave. You look like you look like you're on a boat.
I've had a stressful day, leave me alone.
You think it's your blood pressure? Maybe should we get that? Should we get a cuff on you?
Yeah, probably.
Man, we had so many questions. There's just so many. I'm getting tired, Dave. How about this one?
Tired now, or tired in general, as in tired in life?
Just both. What about BPC nasal spray? Yeah, you can use it, but for muscle strains, you could use BPC nasal spray, but I think it's more effective to do the injectable because you can get, it's just easier, cheaper. You get a lot more in your bloodstream faster.
Yeah, I mean, the BPC, the problem with BPC, TB is quite robust and has a long half-life. BPC doesn't. So the slower the delivery mechanism, the less of it you're going to have available to actually deal with the problem you've got, which is why injection is the most, IV is the most optimum, but injection is the more effective because it gets it in the system faster and it puts it where you want it quicker.
Yeah.
When you go orally, topically, nasally, whatever other weird concoction you want of that compound, you're slowing its delivery, and all the time you're doing that, it's decaying. So you're lessening the effective dose that is reaching the problem area.
Yeah. All right. BPC, more BPC. Can you take it sub-Q? I suppose you could, but I just drive it in the muscle and get a sharper peak. You know what I'm saying?
Same scenario. You put it in sub-Q, you're delaying its absorption, so you're slowing down its effectiveness and its availability.
Okay, how about this one? I once heard that Test is very greedy in terms of attaching to receptors, leaving Tren with no receptors to attach to. Drop Test, increase Tren, then Tren Test at a 2-to-1 ratio. Tried it and no crazy sides. What do you think of that? Is Test greedy, Dave?
No.
I would.
If anything, Tren's more.
Yeah.
So we've covered this quite a few times, but Tren, if you had only had androgen receptors available, I mean, Tren will bind with all sorts of different receptors, so it's not always going to be androgen specific. But if you only had androgen receptors available, Tren has a higher binding affinity than Test does. So therefore, technically, it would win the competition of binding to the AR. DHT has a greater binding affinity than testosterone does. So the DHT that converts from testosterone has a stronger affinity to the AR. But again, Tren trumps that. So Tren would still have the overall providence for binding. Tren binds with lots of different receptors. So one of the reasons why it's so impacting side effect wise is because of this cross receptor binding. But receptors are bound for about 4 hours. Then the compound's released. Receptors die daily and are replaced. When a receptor is bound, when it releases a compound, it splits and creates 2 receptors. So there is no receptor competition. It just doesn't exist.
Yeah.
And it just doesn't exist. So you can argue. I get a lot of message about what ratio of this, what ratio of that, and there is no ratio. You can run your compounds how you want. I know plenty of people that get on with low test and high DECA, but I know plenty of people that don't and need higher test to DECA. They just don't tolerate it well that way. So it's down to your individual sensitivities and your individual tolerances. But there is no set ratio that's better than another one.
I didn't realize we had a bunch of questions here. A bunch of questions. We had like a bunch of comments. I had the comment thing closed. So thank you guys, everybody that I completely ignored. How about that? How about this one, Dave? And I don't think we can really answer it. Quick question. To me, current bodybuilders look small. Well, there's 2 parts, I should say. I don't think we can answer the second. The current bodybuilders look smaller than the past generations. Currently, Mr. Olympia level, guys, he thinks they just aren't as big as they used to be. What do we think about that? And would you say that the current bodybuilders are more mindful and less reckless than people had been in the past when it comes to drug intake?
No, I don't think there's any real change there. I think you still got the same proportion of people that will push to the envelope and those that won't. I don't think that bodybuilders have got smaller. I think, though, that potentially there is less range in physiques. So you would have the likes of Marcus Rule standing next to Lee Labrada, for argument's sake. I'm not saying that actually happened as a comparison, but that was the range of physiques you got in the open classes.
Yeah.
Marcus was one end of the scale as being a mass monster, and Lee was the other end of the scale as being more aesthetic and balanced and proportional and everything else. You know, so you had that. You had people like Nasser El Sambati.
Oh, God.
Competing against, I think he even competed against Rich Gaspari, didn't he? I think Rich was still around when Nasser started.
Did he? We could definitely say Lee, what's his name? Sean Ray. They were around sometime, right?
That's fine. Sean Ray's a perfect example. Another non-mass building bodybuilder. So obviously when you put someone like Nasser against Sean, and I believe Nasser was high 280s on stage, maybe 290.
Yeah, it was huge.
Yeah. And then you look at someone like Nathan Styles, who competed at 296 last weekend.
Yeah.
And you look at the big boys now, they're massive. It's just that everybody else is massive with them.
Yeah, there is that.
Nasser was tall, or relatively tall from bodybuilding terms. What's his name? Won the Olympic a couple of years ago. He was
Ronnie Coleman?
No.
Dorian Yates.
No, newer, you prat.
Samir Bannout?
No, Egyptian or Iranian or
Hadi?
One of them. No, the other one.
Who?
Big guy.
Oh, Big Ramy.
Ramy, yeah. So Ramy was what, touching 300 on stage?
He was a big guy. He still is a big guy.
Yeah, he's what, 5'6", 5'7"?
No, he's got to be, because I've stood next to him. I've stood next to him. Like while he was pumping up. He is taller than me. He's probably like 5'9". Not much taller than me. But I'm like 5'7", 5'8".
He's not a particularly tall guy, is my point.
Yeah.
So, there's plenty of big guys out there. It's just a lot of them are big. So therefore you don't get these crazy comparisons like you used to get.
Yeah.
So I think that's a lot of it. I mean, there's plenty of guys pushing the 300-pound mark standing on stage now.
You know what? There was years back when like Ronnie was in, everybody was trying to push size by all costs, like just as big as you could be to try to keep up with that. And now if you look at the top 5, all their waists are tapered in. Like it's a different game today than it was. So I do feel like compared to like the earlier 2000s, they don't have that like full blown look on stage. But yeah, they're just as big, if not in some cases bigger, man. Like you said. What do you think?
There seems to be more guys pushing the high 200s when you go back. It wasn't that many. I mean, guys pushing the high 200s were odd ones.
But when we look at guys like Hadi and Derek, who are top Olympians, they were 212 guys, but they're short, So he says, what would you say that current bodybuilders are they more mindful? I would say, like you said, man, it everybody varies, but I do think that people are a little bit more mindful now than they used to be. Like this. Before, guys were just like, I just take 2 grams, 3 grams. This is what we do. And it wasn't talked about. Now there's so much talk about it. There are guys that even if they're doing high doses, they're very aware of how high they're going. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think there's an element of that. I think the problem is, or maybe not, the problem is probably the wrong word. It's something that's been recognized in harm reduction research, is that actually the more educated someone becomes, the less risk observant they are, because they feel that because they have knowledge, they're not at risk.
Yeah.
and it's a common thing that's shown that when there's a point where knowledge gets to a point where, because you're knowledgeable, you don't feel you're at risk. You don't feel you're exposing yourself to risk, because I know what I'm doing. I know what I'm talking about. And then as a result, actually do expose yourself to risk because you think your knowledge is enough to carry you through.
Yeah.
I mean, we still have top people dying. Now, I'm not going to say that they died because of steroids, but I'll definitely say that there was a role in there.
Yeah.
So I don't know if the reality, yes, people are more knowledgeable. Yes, people do more blood work, but do they then just discard that because, this is X, Y, Z, this is the other, and how many people have you seen have bad blood work and then come up with every excuse under the sun because of it and then just carry on?
Yeah. Yeah, I know of one of those guys who won a show this year. Somebody I know had has seen his blood work for years, and he said, listen, he doesn't say this publicly, but that guy has really bad labs, and it hurts him a lot to push things. And I was told that a couple of years ago, and he's been very successful this whole time. So it's like, he knows.
The guy that passed at FIBO.
Oh yeah, that poor guy.
Monstro.
Yeah.
Yeah, Monstro spoke to everybody in the industry. You, me, loads of top guys, showed him the blood work. Everybody said the same thing. And he never got it in order. And unfortunately, he passed because of it. There's no doubt that he passed because of it. So it is I honestly don't know what the real answer is. There is more awareness, yes. There is definitely people taking more time to check. There's more supportive supplementation than there's ever been. The health side, supplement-wise, is massive. But at the same time, that's sort of created this false security that, well, I'm taking this, so I don't need to worry about it now.
Yeah, that's true.
Taking that. So it's a really mixed bag. So what is it on balance? I don't know. I really don't know.
All right, Dave, you got any advice of the day for us? You just sounded like a monster when you made that sound. Like for real, you sounded like some sort of monster.
No, not really, I'm afraid. I haven't had a chance to think this week.
Well, I'll give you guys some advice. Make sure that you brush your teeth twice a day.
Did you know that teeth health has a direct link to heart health?
Yes, I did know that. It's important.
So there you go. Yes.
Yeah, that's good. That was really good advice, Dave. I like that. All right, guys. Well, we appreciate you tuning in. Like I said, Dave had a day. So sometimes we can't be our usual. Dave can't always be his lovely, bubbly self. Sometimes he's just a little tired, guys, and you have to just deal with that.
I am sorry, guys.
You don't have to apologize. I'm messing with you.
I'm massively behind. And then I had a meeting for 2.5, 3 hours, marketing meeting with some guys about a new company we're developing. And then I came straight from that into this. And then the 3 hours I was off my phone when I was in the meeting, I've just come back to a shitload of crap. So.
All right. Well, I got a piece of advice for you, Dave. Just keep swimming.
I am going to do that. I am keep swimming. Oh, my toilet broke in my boat yesterday as well.
So what have you been doing? Pooping in the river?
No, I fixed it.
Oh.
But it was a rather smelly job.
Oh, God. What a mess, man. All right, guys. We appreciate everybody tuning in. Go to... Dave, are you running a Pillars anytime soon? New Pillars?
So the PED course has just finished. And then... So I'm doing it slightly different now. So what I do is I run the PED course, which is 5 weeks. And then I tack on the 2 pillar course days to the end of that if anybody wants to stop on.
Okay.
So there's 2 pillar days to run this Thursday and next Thursday, and then I will start taking numbers for the new PED course, which I expect to start 2nd or 3rd week in October.
Okay.
So the ped course is proving to be much more popular, and obviously I can offer that cheaper because it's less time.
Sounds like a plan. Reach out to Dave if you want to do some pillars of strength, and check out Strom Sports Nutrition. Get some good health and performance supplements there. They've got good health stacks, especially if you're on cycle. It's something you could definitely use. And truenutrition.com, use our code THINK over there. Supplementsource.ca for our Canadians. Of course, evalbloodanalysis.com to get your lab work done by Dave. And guys, you can reach out to me for coaching, McNallyDiets@gmail.com, and reach out to Dave on his social media, which will be in the description. So start getting your pictures over now for your the end of the transformation contest, and we'll start going through those. You'll have to give us a couple of weeks to sort things out, and then we'll see if we can get somebody to help us get the final results back to you. So give us just a little bit of time on that. And for another episode of Drugs and Stuff with Dave Crosland, we will see you soon.